In October of 2021, Dune Part 1 released, and I decided to check it out after hearing great things. This quickly immersed me in the Dune universe. I loved the movie, and I thought that the world was incredibly interesting. So, for the past 2 years, I read the book. That's right, one book, and I'm not even done. There's technically 3 books in one, and all of them are like 300 pages. It's a lot. But I'm in book 3, and so far, it's one of the coolest books I've ever read. I also watched a couple more movies from director Denis Villeneuve, but I had mixed thoughts about those. I thought that they were generally stunning, but the writing and characters weren't as interesting as the visuals. Finally, Dune Part 2 was announced, and all of my preparation was about to pay off. I rewatched the first film, then waited, eventually getting to sit my ass down and watch 2 hours and 46 minutes of a film that feels like it was made by aliens. Let's talk about it. I'll be spoiling all over the place, so you better have seen it. Let's get one thing out of the way, this is better than the first one. As I rewatched Part 1, I found myself enjoying it slightly less. I think it's just because I've now read everything that Part 1 was adapting, and I prefer the book version. The character's way of speaking, the meticulous personalities built for even the smallest roles, what the viewer was allowed to know, it all felt more precise and accurate in the book. I still quite like Part 1, but not as much as I used to. Meanwhile, what I've read that was adapted in Part 2 may have just been improved upon. I haven't read all of it, but I can safely say that this film skips a lot of events, and I think it's for the better. Putting focus on something like the Feyd-Rautha fight over Paul getting the belongings of the Fremen man he killed is a good idea when you have to wrap up the entire book. Additionally, while Timothée Chalamet was slightly underwhelming as Paul, who is meant to be like a boy genius to an inhuman level in Part 1, the venom he brings to this role in this film is genuinely frightening. The young lad stepped up his game. There are scenes where Paul has to confidently say that he could kill all of his followers if he wanted to, and Timothy doesn't sound goofy or weird saying it. He sounds great. He sounds scary. Shifting focus a bit, I have to address the technical achievements on display. I would easily say that the best part of Denis Villeneuve's films is the visuals. I personally think that Arrival is overrated. You can crucify me for that, but the movie looks like $1,000,000. Sicario, which I watched recently, has some shots that I'm not forgetting anytime soon. And when the first Dune came out, it was eye-opening. There were visuals crafted that didn't feel possible. With all that in mind, I can confidently state that this is his best-looking movie by a decent amount. The most unbelievable moment of all has to be that first sequence where Jessica drinks the water of life. It looks like pain and it feels like chaos. The blues are purely terrifying, and the edit going absolutely fucking insane hurts my brain in the best way. Later on, Paul takes his final test to become one of the Fremen people and to prove to them once again that he is Lisan al-Gaib, their savior. This scene in which he resists and rides the path of the grandfather sandworm is so up close. I was scared that they would cut away to the Fremen people thinking he was dead or something like that, but they don't. They let you experience all of this with Paul as he realizes the great task that he's brought upon himself and struggles to complete it, but ultimately overcomes the challenge through careful moments that have you on the edge of your seat. It's raw as all hell. The visuals are matched with the sound, which is just pounding your ears. It's a loud movie, of course, but for good reason. With each action sequence, usually when the Fremen attack the Harkonnens, you'll have, giant ships falling out of the sky and exploding while Paul dramatically reveals himself. And holy shit, the sounds you will hear are both haunting and just so exciting. The music by Hans Zimmer is also working flawlessly, giving the film that intense Arabian feel. Everything is enhanced by what you're hearing. One of the smaller parts of the movie that's actually one of my few negatives is the comedy. Pretty much 99% of the movies I've enjoyed in my life have made me laugh at least once, even if it's out of just absurdity in a situation, or pure shock and awe, or something like that. So I'm completely open to some comedy. The thing is, I just don't think this movie has the right type of comedy. The jokes aren't really witty or fitting for the Dune universe. Despite how overdone it is to get mad at Marvel-like quips, these really are Marvel-like quips, and they come out of nowhere. There's definitely some good comedy in the movie, but the only moments where I feel thrown off are the bad jokes. So let's talk story. Paul and his mother Jessica are now shacking up with the Fremen, the desert people of Arrakis. I heavily enjoy how quickly the Fremen begin worshipping Paul as Lisan al-Gaib, getting to the point of infighting over whether he'll survive the challenges or not. They're even more sure than he is that he's the one, and that makes their ultimate decision to be his followers to their deaths more earned. Paul could insult them and their families all he wants, but he is essentially their god. They will do anything for him. This doesn't make them simple, dumbed-down versions of their previous selves. It's a new layer to each of their characters that's both painful and respectable. This is their prophecy, and they choose to follow it. They just don't know what they're getting themselves into. Early on, Jessica drinks the Kool-Aid and turns all wacky. This is a huge turning point for her character, becoming the Reverend Mother, as she quickly begins to act aggressive towards the Fremen and rushes to her plans of making Paul the leader of all. She seems to be controlled by her own unborn daughter, who is referred to as the Kwisatz Haderach, I believe, and is said to be extremely powerful. When Paul later drinks the water as well, he sees his sister, so I believe that her conversations with her baby started as a result of this. Rebecca Ferguson plays this spooky, creepy version of Jessica perfectly. She's a woman of the desert now, and she feels impenetrable. She's got the desert power and the Bene Gesserit wisdom. Honestly, it's scary how easily she can control those around her. Jessica in this movie feels much more evil than in the books, but I'm actually kind of down for that change. I like the kind and wise book version, but they make this eerie Empress Jessica who leads Paul into the dark work. After this point, there starts to be a noticeable shift in power. The Harkonnens are sorta not doing so hot in this movie. I mean, the Feyd-Rautha arena fight scene makes them look absolutely badass, but they barely win any actual fights at all, and that's because they've been pushed out of their roles as main villains. As Paul and Jessica begin to get more greedy for power, villains aren't really needed. They are the villains, and they have so much strength that they're defeating their adversaries at every turn. While I would have liked to see more of the Baron being a creepy little fucker, his presence is super interesting. It's eventually revealed that Paul and Jessica are Harkonnens themselves, and Jessica is the daughter of the Baron. Paul sees this as reason to act like the Harkonnens, and by this point, they've fully transformed into the bad guys. And so, shockingly, the Fremen attack a meeting between the Harkonnens and the Emperor, played by Christopher Walken, and Paul kills the Baron. He is, at this point, so undefeatable that nobody even tries to stop him despite there being many members of the Harkonnen house in the room. Afterwards, Gurney Halleck kills Rabban Harkonnen, and things start to fall apart. Finally, Paul goes for the top job. He literally threatens to take out the Emperor due to his part in the Duke, Paul's father's, murder. Instead, Feyd-Rautha volunteers to fight Paul, and is killed after a grueling, violent, and incredibly done duel. The movie ends as Paul takes power, practically being the new leader of the houses, and prepares to fight those houses that are pissed off at him. But before we wrap up the plot, I have to mention Chani. Chani is a Fremen woman that becomes infatuated with Paul, and they date throughout the course of the film. She switches up her feelings for him many times, but the simplest way to describe her is that she's the only Fremen who is not blinded by him. She's scared for his life during the challenges, while most others believe he cannot die due to the prophecy. When he drinks the water of life and develops an ego larger than Russia, beginning to berate his own followers for being weaker than him, she's the only one who's hurt by it. While I still think Zendaya isn't giving one of the strongest performances in the cast, Johnny feels like a deeply thought-out character with a genuinely great arc by the end, and that's good, because she does basically nothing for the whole first movie. Her place in the story is huge by the end, and she's one of the biggest unanswered questions. I couldn't tell you how things are going to end up for her, even though we literally see her future, and I think that's fascinating. Something I like about this film is that it doesn't actually wrap up, really. Despite this being the end of Book 3, I assume, it doesn't feel like a conclusion. It is very clear that the story is not done, and that's where Dune Messiah comes into play. The movie does a very good job of making you want to see that one too. Paul's nightmares of him walking through deserts full of starving followers don't come to fruition, but you know they will. The final detail to touch on is something that is a collaborative effort between Denny and Frank Herbert, the author of the books, and that's the world building. It feels like for any science fiction story to be good, you have to create an interesting and real world, a world you can immerse yourself in. The world of Dune is so creative and complex that each chapter of the book starts with an excerpt from a different fake book inside the same universe. Gurney Halleck quotes multiple books that also only exist inside this series. and the way Denny brings that to the big screen is wonderful. I really couldn't imagine a better way of showing it. When I read the books, this is the universe I picture. They absolutely fucking nailed it. If the characters spoke in the same way that they do in the books, like they're all kind of 50-year-old therapists that don't like jokes, I would have no issue with calling this the perfect adaptation. This truly is Dune. Part 2. That's Dune Part 2, I guess. It's hard to summarize, and there's always going to be more to say, but those are my general thoughts. The performances are spectacular across the board, the visuals could make me cry out of how much they remind me why I love movie making, and it ends in a place that leaves me wanting more. It's a solid 9.5 out of 10, and is going to be really hard to beat as the best movie of the year. I hope you enjoyed my cute little review, and I hope you subscribe because that's what all the cool kids are doing these days. The uncool loser kids that get shoved in lockers are watching David Lynch's version of Dune, so that's next on my list. I'll see you next week, as long as that one doesn't kill me. Thank you very much for your time, and bye now.